All right, so I have another real versus fake for you. This time it's the Rolex GMT Master 2. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Timeless Watch channel, guys. This time around we have another real versus fake. This time it's the GMT Master 2. This is the real one, but I have a very convincing looking fake version that I'm going to put beside it. I love this watch. It's super gorgeous. I got it just before, or just around the time when they announced, excuse me, at Basel World that they weren't doing it anymore. They didn't announce they weren't doing it. They just showed us what they were selling from now on, and everybody realized, hold on, that means they're not doing the black one anymore. After that, the price went through the roof, as you all know. Now, once again, before I get into any of this, I must stress that telling a fake from a genuine is easiest to do when you have them in your hands. You're going to see close-up video now, and there will be things that will stand out to you, and I'll outline those things. But honestly, guys, if you have one in your hands, they're really the touch and the feel is the true giveaway. Moving the crown, moving the bezel, just manipulating the watch, opening the clasp and closing the clasp. These are the ways that you can identify a fake. Just looking at it from a distance, it can be difficult. I'm going to take a nice close look at both of these watches side by side, and let's see if we can educate you guys on how to spot a fake GMT Master 2, a good one, from the real McCoy. Here we go.
All right, guys, so one is fake and one is real. Can you tell me which? These are the GMT Master 2 by Rolex. This is the 116710 LN Lunette Noire, so it's the fully black one. But of course, one of these is not real, one of them is 100% real. Can you tell which one just by eyeballing it straight off? Well, as always, on the left is the replica and on the right is the real one. First of all, I have to say it's an excellent copy. I've actually had a couple of different friends who know watches pretty well take a quick look and not spot the differences straight off. In fact, one guy thought this was the real one. I told him not to touch anything, not to turn the bezel, not to manipulate the crown in any way, just to take a look and tell me which one. And I think what threw him off is that the writing on the bezel is a little finer than it is on the real one, and he therefore assumed that this must be the real one. These inserts here, these numbers and the triangle here at the 12 o'clock position are actually platinum inlays. So they're deep inlays into the cerachrome of the bezel, which will explain why they are kind of soft looking. Whereas on the replica, this is just paint on the, just painted on. I would highly doubt if it was some sort of proper insert. It certainly isn't platinum, that's for sure. But I think the thing that stands out to me the most is the fact that the dial is set up a little bit differently on the copy, on the replica. The indices seem to be pretty good. Obviously, they're not white gold like they are on the real one, but these indices all seem to be a little closer to the center of the dial. If you take a good look there, the indices on the real one are spaced a little bit closer to the bezel. So on this one, it kind of closes up the look of it a little bit, making it appear a tiny bit smaller a watch, I want to say. It's kind of weird. Also, I noticed that the little minute markers just at the very edge of the dial, those tiny little, are more evident. If you take a look at the real one, they're there, but they don't stand out as much. They seem to be smaller and not as brightly printed. So I think that's the thing that kind of hits me straight off between the two. Now, the head of the watch, the actual shape of the head of the watch is virtually identical. The replica is a little bit thicker and not quite as wide. Now, from the side, you can see there that the bezel is higher, is set a little higher and a little thicker on the replica than it is on the real thing. There's something lower, smoother, more condensed about the real one than the copy, than the replica. Because of that, because this part is taller, just ever so slightly, you would probably never notice it just looking from the side by itself. But it shows up itself when you look at the dial. Because this is kind of technically thinner, it means the dial is shallower underneath the sapphire crystal, whereas this dial just a little bit deeper. So the whole distance between the crystal and the size of the rehaut is just a little thicker, and the dial seems to be deeper down inside it, just by a hair, but it's enough to notice. Speaking of the rehaut, of course, on these models, and ever since maybe 2010, everything after that, they have the Rolex repeat rehaut, whereas they engrave the word Rolex repeatedly around the rehaut, and it has a tiny crown in the center. Now, the counterfeiters have done a pretty good job. They've actually done it themselves too. And there it is. It's not quite as perfect engraving as you will see on the real one, but it's pretty convincing, especially to the naked eye. If you get in there with a loop or a micro lens, then the cracks begin to show, and that's fine. But they also have the crown up at the very top. So they're following all the guidelines. Let's look at the print on the dial. Of course, they've copied all the lines of print, but they're not absolutely perfect copies. I think with the naked eye, you might be fairly convinced. I think these lines of writing down the bottom are a little smaller than on the replica, again making the dial just look larger when you look at it. This dial looks a bit smaller and busier, even though they're exactly the same size, just because the writing is ever so slightly larger. And of course the Rolex writing is very, very convincing, but it's not absolutely perfect. Looking at the hands, if you take a look at the real hands, in particular the GMT hand, which is particular to this watch with its beautiful green, you'll notice that the green on this one doesn't look quite as good, and the hand itself looks quite different. Now, when you get in nice and close on these GMT hands, then you really see the difference in production quality between one and the other. You'll notice that this is a automatic movement. They haven't put a cheap quartz movement in. They've done made some sort of effort to make it look real. As you can see, the seconds hand is swooping around. Yeah, the Cyclops, years ago on the bad copies used to be there, but not actually magnifying anything at all. Instead, this is a 2.5 magnification, just like on the real thing. Now, you will notice that on the real thing, the print is quite different. It's much finer, much nicer on the real one. Moving over to the crown, if we take a good look at the crown on both, there's the real one, and here's the replica. Pretty nice job, not so bad. Moving over to the bracelet itself, now of course on the real thing, Rolex used the 904L steel, which is a beautiful shiny steel. It has a particular way it catches the light, and it's extremely soft and smooth against the skin. Very, very nice steel. I'm not sure what steel they're using on this. Normally with watches they use 316L steel. Rolex, of course, have to be different, so they use their 904L, and they claim that it's much better. Now, as you know, with the GMT Master 2, we have brushed outer links and high gloss polished center links. It adds a kind of a dressiness to the watch. Let's take a look at how they both react to the light. I think the replica is kind of reflecting light quite nicely. Let me polish it up there a bit. But when you see the real thing, it just grabs the light a little bit more class. I don't know what it is. It's hard to describe. Moving around to the clasp. This is not the clasp at all for the GMT. This is the GMT clasp here. It's not a huge clasp as new Rolex clasps go. It has this hook and beak system. This clams over and locks everything in, and this comes away, and so on and so forth, all the usual stuff on the inside. But it doesn't have a glide lock system like the Submariner does. It has a little easy link system where you can add or subtract 5 centimeters. So it's just for those slightly warmer days where you need a little bit of relief, and you can release just to loosen up the watch on your wrist. The replica seems to have a counterfeit, a replica Submariner clasp on there. Again, everything looks the same except for the size, the width of the clasp, or the length of the clasp, and it seems to have the glide lock system, so it glides through. Now, glide is a very generous term for this because it's kind of scraping. It's not gliding. I have a few Submariners and they all glide very nicely. This isn't exactly gliding. In fact, right now it's not doing anything at all. Let me see if it'll work from a different angle. Yeah, right now it's not. Oh yeah, okay, there it goes. It's moving a bit. But I've noticed with this one it's kind of bandy as well. I've seen replica ones that actually work pretty well. This one doesn't work very well, and once you lock it in, it keeps kind of snapping back to its furthest position anyway. So one complaint a lot of people have with this model and other models like the Yacht Master 40 that have high gloss center links is people complain about the micro scratches. Let me see if I can pick them up there. No matter how careful you are with your watch, you're going to get these little tiny micro scratches in here. Let me tighten up my glove. But I noticed that on the replica, it kind of reacts differently. Now, I've worn this a few times and I was typing on the computer and so on. And as you can see, as my wrist moved around on the desk, instead of getting those usual little micro scratches, it kind of just got this kind of blurry, fadey effect happening of scratches. I assume that's multiple scratches, but they kind of blur into one another. So the steel definitely reacts in a different way to abrasion than the 904L steel. Also, there are small details in here that just make me laugh. I mean, they've done a pretty good job with the Rolex print there, the little logo, whereas the real one, let's see if I can pull this open. As you can see, it's a very different kind of thing. The print is sharper and finer. There's a few things here that just kind of give me a chuckle. The Rolex SA symbol, which is in here, that's on most Rolex watches. It's a very difficult symbol to print correctly. And if I show you the replica version, with the naked eye, it might seem like it's fine. It might seem like it's the real thing. There it is there. But when you get up close, you just realize what a farce. Like, it's just really badly etched out. Just extremely amateur job. Another thing as well that the real ones have is on the sapphire crystal, of course, there's a tiny crown down here. I'll try and get the light to catch it. There's a tiny crown etched, little Rolex crown etched in the sapphire crystal right under the 6 indice there. And honestly, if you can see it with the naked eye, you're probably looking at a fake watch. If you look at the replica, it can actually be seen with the naked eye, and it's real shoddy work. It's just kind of, it's a messy little job. The case back, of course, is, I mean, Rolex are asking for it with the case back, aren't they? I mean, their case backs are very boring, very plain. There's nothing going on here. So of course the counterfeiter is going to have a field day with this. Is the easiest part of his job. If you take a good look there at where the solid end links meet the head of the watch, they're not as perfectly flush as they could be. the way they marry the head of the watch is not exactly perfect, and they're kind of larger holes here. If you look on the real one, it's just the way it marries the head there. It's very snug and very perfect, as you would expect. And the holes to release the to take off the bracelet are slimmer and more sleek than the replica. But again, you'd have to have a good eye for these things to spot exactly that. Of course, the rest of the bracelet, they're all they're solid end links here, of course, as you would expect, and solid links all the way down. The bracelet is actually extremely comfortable. It's well spaced out. There's no pinching of hair or skin or anything like that. It's impressively made, I have to say. But the real test here, I think, is to weigh the watch to see how it comes out here, because a lot of stores that buy and sell watches, their first filter system is to weigh the watch first and see if it weighs as much as the real thing. And if it comes out shy of 5 or 10 grams, then they know there might be something up and they have to take another look. All right, so I have my weighing scales calibrated, and I'm going to put on the genuine watch to see what it comes in at. Exactly 148 grams. Let me just put it back down again just to make sure. 148. That's the genuine watch. And here we go, guys, the moment of truth. Now again, it's got a larger clasp, but then I had to take an extra link off because of the size of that clasp. Oh boy. With a bullet. Exactly the same weight. Dear God, what have we come to? What have we come to? This, my friends, weighs exactly the same weight, down to the very gram, as the genuine. I'm shocked. I think in the end, the best way to identify a fake is to start moving things. So, what moves on a watch? Well, on this particular watch and on Submariners and so on, the bezel turns. So if I turn the bezel, it doesn't feel very nice under my finger. That's no help to you. You're watching a video. There's no way I can truly explain it, but underneath my fingers, it feels kind of slightly loose and scrapey. That's the only way I can describe it. It feels like metal scraping against metal, but kind of cheap metal. When I move the real one, it moves in the same units, and it just feels super buttery. It's extremely hard to explain. You would have to manipulate it yourself with your own fingers. The next thing is the crown, and this is the big one. I mean, this is the real moment of truth. And this has the trip lock system, so this crown is locked in to make it waterproof. I have no idea if this watch is truly waterproof. I highly doubt it. Certainly not as waterproof as the real McCoy over here. But or water resistant, I would say, is the proper terminology. But let me unscrew the crown. Now, just unscrewing the crown, I can tell you that I can feel metal scrape off metal again. Again, a scrapey, cheap kind of experience, but it has popped out and it is into position. Now I can move the crown to wind, and even the winding, it feels light and flimsy. I know I can feel I'm winding something. I am giving the watch power, but it's not very satisfying in its movement. Whereas the real one, I mean, just unscrewing it feels extremely beautifully made and professional. And now it's popped out into its position. It's no longer water resistant now, by the way. But now I can wind it. And as I wind it, I feel a weight and a beauty to the movement. It's quite significant and satisfying. Even with my gloves on, I can feel the difference. So the crown is really where you should begin, probably. If you pick up a watch that you're not sure is genuine, I would say if you want to cut straight to the chase, I would say unscrew the crown and manipulate the movement. It's very difficult for these counterfeiters to make this feel convincing, to make it feel right. I'll just sum up with a couple of things. First of all, we just confirmed that they're the same weight. So weight-wise, there's no way to detect that one watch is real and one watch is not. Second of all, when you have them side by side like this, the differences are obvious. The problem is you rarely do. If you're purchasing a GMT Master 2, it's unlikely you have one right there to put it side by side with. So you're faced with this by itself, and you're kind of working blind. If you're going to buy a GMT Master 2 and you have a friend who has one, maybe ask him along so you can at least put the two side by side or feel the difference between the two under your fingertips. So there it is, GMT Master 2. This is the real one here. She's very, very, very beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful watches I've ever owned. I'm very proud to own it, especially as it's gone way up in value since it was put out of production. And this one's the Imposter. It's not a bad replica, guys. It really isn't. But of course, when you put it up to the real thing, it can't compare. By the way, price-wise, this thing used to be about $8,500, $9,000. The price has gone way up. And now for a used one, you're looking about $11,000, $12,000. And for one that has never been worn, has just been put away safely, you're looking at about $15,000, $16,000. This thing you'll pick up for a couple of $100.
And that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you found that interesting. And I'll see you in the next one.